So good morning, everyone. My name is Jomarginel Paroan, and today I'm going to report about C-sharp form controls, more specifically, the radio button control. Before we get into the actual designing part, let's give a brief overview of this control. Radio button control. A radio button, also known as an option button, allows the user to choose one option from a list of options when paired with other radio button controls. When a user selects a radio button, it is checked, and all other radio buttons in that group are unchecked. So basically, radio button is used when a user needs to select from a set of mutually exclusive elements. And I will be explaining later what mutually exclusive elements mean. Radio button is a class in C# that is found under systems.windows.forms namespace, meaning you can use the keyword radio button to derive objects from the said class. And when you select any radio button in a set of radio buttons, you can display text, pictures, or both. Meaning when you select from a radio button set, you can display text or pictures related to your chosen radio button. In special cases, you can also put pictures instead of text beside radio buttons, but text is more commonly preferred. There's another type of selection control in C# called checkbox, and it functions just like radio buttons, but somehow they're so different from one another. The main function of checkboxes and radio buttons is for selection of elements. But the key difference between the two is that checkboxes allow users to select items from a limited number of options, whereas radio buttons allow users to select exactly one item from a list of multiple options. In radio buttons, you are allowed to only select one choice, but in checkboxes, selecting multiple elements is allowed. This also sets boundaries between the purposes of each selection buttons, the radio button and the checkbox. When to use radio button? Use radio buttons to let users select from two or more mutually exclusive options. When using radio button, the elements in them should be mutually exclusive, meaning that all of them can't be chosen simultaneously. This is where the idea that only one element is allowed to be picked from a set of radio button elements. For example, if you choose the radio button yes, you cannot choose the radio button no anymore. Use radio buttons when users need to see all options before they make a selection. Radio buttons emphasize all options equally, unlike combo box, which displays the best option as the default option. And all elements are given of equal attention by default. One can be more important than the other, and it's up to the user what radio button they will choose and focus on. The next slides or the next part is just a few recommendations when using radio buttons, and they are just recommendations, meaning it's not necessarily needed to be emphasized. So let's now go to the actual designing of the radio button control in C#, develop. So step one, you need to open Sharp Develop or any IDE for C# language. And you need to go to New Solution. Then you need to click on the Windows application and you need to name it however you like it. And then you need to create it now. The next step, or step two, is you need to open the design. And then you need to view tools and drag and drop the radio button control from the toolbox onto the Windows form. According to your needs, a radio button control can be placed anywhere on the Windows form. From here, you can basically do just about anything to design your radio button as you please. So I will be demonstrating what radio button is. So first, you need to view, and then tools, and then forms. And then you need to drag radio button onto the main form. And if you want to have many radio buttons, you just drag and drag and drag. And then the first one is the tab index 0, and then the second one is the tab index 1, and then the third is the tab index 3, meaning they are in chronological order already. What you drag first is the first one, and then the second one, and the third one. And then for If you want to change the text that appears next to the radio button, you just go here to the text and you need to edit this. Let's say you want to edit this like male. And then likewise, if you edit this to female, and then it's going to be like that. And then if you have already edited all of them, and then the last one is prefer not to say, you have your first radio button control. And then the selections are male, female, and prefer not to say. And if you want to group them, so you don't have to manually edit them like this, you drag one by one. You just need to go here and onto the group box, and then drag the group box here, and then edit the group box to categorize the selection controls or the radio button controls. Let's say this is gender, which and then the gender will appear here. And you just need to drag all of the choices inside the group box like this. So now it's already grouped, and you don't need to manually drag them one by one in order to replace its position. And then that is essentially the basic idea of what a radio control is. And then I have here the other code, which is essentially the same, but I have here a button. So when you click any of the radio button controls and then you click submit, it will output something like this. So when I run this, so if you run them, it will say male, female, prefer not to say. And if you click male and then you submit, it will appear male. So how to do it is you just need to double click the radio button. So you edit its function here. And then here is the code behind the choices. So if you need to have an if else statement. So if the condition is if the radio button 1 is checked, then it will show the text of that radio button, which is male. So radio button 1 text is male. And then you need to have another if, and it's if radio button 2 checked, then it's going to show radio button text 2. And then likewise, the third is 3. So it will only show this. So when you run this, let's look at the source code again. And if radio button 1 is checked, then it will show male. So it should show male. And then here you go male. And then if you click female, and then if you click the third button, which is prefer not to say, that's it. So some reminders before I end this presentation. So if you want to group them, there are radio button controls. You just need to have a group box. And if you want a button, it can be anything. It can be a button, a label, but if you click button, it should have the if statements for the choices. It's like a switch case for this instance. And if you want an default unchecked radio button controls, you just need to go to the checked one and have this as false, as well as this, the checked one is false. So its default value should be unchecked because the checked is false. That is basically the idea behind radio button controls, is that it's used for selection. You can choose 2 or more options inside the radio button controls, and you can group box the radio button controls. It's a very helpful and a very convenient tool used with radio button, and you can choose default unchecked for radio button controls. Thank you for listening. Again, I am Jomar Janel Aparoan from BS Comsci, and here are my references for this report.